In the craziness of today, the Senate also heard testimony from the former director for the Centers for Disease Control, who was fired by Trump just last month. CDC Director Susan Menarez says she was forced out of the job after she refused to pre-approve the vaccine recommendations of RFK Jr.'s handpicked panel of vaccine skeptics without regard to any science. Today, some of the same Republican senators who voted to confirm her just weeks ago tried to turn her into some kind of villain, and it did not go well.
The burden should be on you. You want to make all the kids take this? The burden is upon you and the people you wouldn't fire to prove to us that we need to give our 6-month-old a COVID vaccine and that we need to give our 1-day-old a hepatitis B vaccine. That's what the debate ought to be about, not whether all vaccines are good or whether we live in Alice in Wonderland.
I actually agree with you, and I was open to the science. I just would not pre-commit to approving all the ACIP recommendations without the science.
Untrue.
I love how she has a look on her face like she knows what she's going to say as he's winding himself up there and getting all into a lather. So Rand Paul says the burden should be on her and the CDC to explain why kids need vaccines. And the former CDC director says, yes, I agree with you. That is what scientists are supposed to do, defend their conclusions against rigorous questioning. It was like that over and over again. Frankly, it's amazing that this hearing happened at all, given that Republicans control the Senate. So this hearing was called by Republican Health Committee Chair Senator Bill Cassidy. Now, remember, Senator Cassidy was initially on the fence about confirming RFK Jr. initially. He eventually voted for his confirmation only after he says Secretary Kennedy promised not to make changes to the CDC's Vaccine Advisory Committee, which is exactly what Secretary Kennedy then did. The reason all of that was so important to Senator Cassidy is because he himself is a doctor who has staked his reputation as a medical professional on an obviously bogus promise from RFK Jr. But that is kind of the theme for Republicans here. They got themselves into this mess. There's no political gain in any of this beyond appeasing Donald Trump. But there are very, very real costs.
What keeps you up at night? What keeps you both up at night, very concisely?
The next outbreak. And I don't believe that we'll be prepared.
I'm concerned about the future of CDC and public health in our country. Given what I have seen, if we continue down this path, we are not prepared, not just for pandemics, but for preventing chronic health disease, and we're going to see kids dying of vaccine-preventable diseases.
Joining us now here at the table is Dr. Deborah Howry, the former CDC chief medical officer who resigned in protest of the firing of former CDC Director Susan Menarez. She was one of the witnesses in today's Senate hearing. You've had the longest day, and I am so grateful that you're here. So many people have so many questions about health right now. I just wanted to start. I mean, one of the things I've been trying to do is help people understand what's normal and what's not normal. And today you said a lot of things that struck me. One of the things you said is that you never got to brief Secretary Kennedy in your capacity as the CDC's chief medical officer. That is completely crazy, I can just say. And you never heard back when you offered to do so. Talk about how crazy that is and also what that means. What should people understand about where he was getting his information if he wasn't getting it from the chief medical officer?
Yeah, would love to tell you where he was getting his information from, but we don't know. You know, sometimes we would see different posts from groups he'd been involved in, and then we'd get questions that were from that, likely, but we don't know who he was getting information from. I can tell you it wasn't myself or my senior leaders. During the measles outbreak, we suggested a briefing might be helpful, particularly when he misstated things like, you know, the vaccines having fetal parts in it or recommending inhaled steroids. Those were things we certainly wanted to correct. And then just regular, you know, briefings on, you know, flu, we thought was important as well. Just any of his priorities. But when we offered it to several of the HHS leaders, they said, great, we'll take it back, but we didn't hear.
At the same time, I mean, the hearing, it happened in advance of a 2-day meeting of a vaccine advisory panel, which is expected to make changes in recommendations. Dr. Menarez also told the committee that RFK said he talks to Trump every day about the childhood vaccine schedule. That is also not normal in any way. Not to say not normal is a kind of minimizing it. What should people be concerned about that?
So, you know, I think they should be concerned because he hasn't spoken to his vaccine scientists, and he's speaking to the president. And what concerns me about the vaccine committee is they're not following the usual process. And certainly change is fine, right? But when you're not looking at how valid the data is, how rigorous it is, and then posting it for public comment and engagement, it really doesn't have that radical transparency that the administration's been talking about. And when recommendations come out that haven't truly been vetted like that, and the expertise on this panel is different too, I have concerns.
One of the things, and we were just talking about this before you came on, I mean, nobody should forget there was a shooting at the CDC not that long ago this summer. People who are trying to provide public health information that's not partisan in any way, shape, or form, that can be challenged, can be questioned, feel under threat. And feel like their lives are threatened. You're out here speaking. There are others who are out here speaking, incredibly courageous to do. When you talk to some of your former colleagues or employees about either today's hearing or just in general, how are they feeling in this moment?
I think a lot of them are feeling very traumatized. And, you know, the shooting in particular, I think, you know, many of the staff were there, you know, protecting their kids at the daycare or trying to leave work when shooting happened. And because this was related to COVID misinformation, they feel targeted. You know, and there were 500 bullets that were fired.
Yeah.
And when I walked those halls and I saw broken glass and bullets in the wall by my colleagues' names, it was devastating. And so for many of them, there's still significant trauma and fear. And if our scientists aren't able to speak publicly about data, vaccines, outbreaks because they're worried about their personal safety, we're in a lot of trouble.
The work you do is so important. I just wanted to thank you really for being here, for being out there and speaking publicly. And as I mentioned, there are so many people out there who don't feel like they have access to the information they need. If you were advising, and we only have about 30 seconds left, but people on what they should do, should everybody go get a COVID vaccine?
You know, I think everybody should stay up to date on their vaccinations and talk with your doctor. That's what I'm telling everybody now, is ask your doctor what is best for you.
That is excellent advice. As always, thank you for being here. So many people rely on expertise like yours.
Thank you.